It is just at that moment when you decide to freely will your own existential predetermination, essentially, that you can fully release in truth into love and participation in the story. It is only when you can actually decide, in a sense, to accept your own necessity on a deep level, which is ultimately the ultimate challenge of consciousness itself, just to accept its own necessity and figuring out what that means. And the reality is it's all beautifully constructed by the Logos, such that your journey is towards a determination point that is basically predetermined. But the path you take to get from point A to point B is up to you. But once you realize that there is a predetermined point that you're barreling toward, then you want to realign your will such that you just participate in the journey towards it. Because eventually it just becomes less and less free in terms of your options as you approach it. And ultimately, Calvary is the ultimate expression of God's own revelation of this in his total obedience to the Father, even to the cross. He accepted his destiny because he saw it was ultimately beautiful. And that is the way we should relate to our own selves. And Christ is the super object to relate to ultimately, but then there's also much we can zoom in and see our own lives and our own situations and how that is ultimately putting us towards a certain predestined point in which we have to deal with ourselves. And once you accept that, it's a release into it, because it's just fun to understand that that's what it's going to be. And that's what it is, because everyone's final end is God. The good news about all this is that everyone's predestination is ultimately so glorious and beautiful that it astounds the intellect. If you find God, your soul is resculpted into an object of hilarious beauty. It's incredible. And this is the central aspect of what consciousness must learn, what it must learn in its being, that it wants to know why it must be, why it is necessary that I be right now. And the only way to do that is to accept in consciousness and in being one's own predetermination. And the only way one can do that is by knowing the truth that if you just see that this is how it is, you are predetermined to God. Because that's what you will determine your will toward. And you accept that, and the path that gets you there is, in a sense, up to you to a certain level, but you're trying to figure out what the best path is for you, that God wants for you, because that's the one that's going to reveal yourself to you in the most exciting, glorious possible way. And we are all defined individually by our own confrontations with our own anxieties, our own problems, our own demons. And this is our journey, which is ultimately part of God's journey to understand himself and understand why he had to be Jesus Christ. And so our pain, to a certain extent, is a beautiful part of the story. That's why we're engaged in the human drama. In a way, it's to accept the story of the world and accept the game that we're in as a drama game in which anxiety is overcome in love. But you have to confront the anxiety first. You accept your predetermination. And then you can release the will. But how do you know what you're predetermined toward? You have to have faith in God. Because then it's about relating to your consciousness in a new way. It's about relating to your consciousness as the object that is transforming into love by a confrontation with truth. And that is what is going on.